All right. Oh, wait, I forgot, Andy. You got to put the picture up of the people who pay the bills. There we go. Now it's officially the late night happy hour. Brian Kamenetzky on the right side tonight, Andy Kamenetzky on the left, and in the middle, you know him
Hello.
as the great Hall of Fame photographer. Primarily with the his NBA shots. He is also the host of the Legends of Sport podcast with through the LA Times. You find it everywhere. You get your podcast. It's really cool. It's had some great guests on this show. Andy Bernstein, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Fellas, I miss you. I'm so glad to see you guys.
We miss you too. We're used to just bumping into each other, crossing paths in Staples Center,
Yes.
and none of us had been there. We were talking to you before the show, and you said that you have not snapped a photo since
No.
March 11th. March 11th, by the way, was the day that the NBA shut down. The day Rudy
Yeah.
Gobert tested positive, Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson, and basically the world just turned upside down.
Yeah, it's crazy. I had packed up some gear because I was supposed to do the Clippers team photo the next day, and that got canceled. Everything else got canceled. Rudy Gobert announced he had it, and boom, that was the end of everything. So 4 months, longest I've ever gone in my career, honestly, without taking a picture.
So I'm saying, so
Well, a lot of them are.
you don't walk around the house just taking pictures of stuff like still lifes and things like that, creating things, composing things. That's not how
No,
you.
I've never done that. But my 12-year-old, my daughter, actually took a photo class this week, and she's been shooting some pretty good stuff. So I don't know, maybe it's in the DNA somehow. But I was kind of living vicariously through her.
It's interesting you say that because we're going to be getting into some of this later on in the show, but as long as there's like an organic way to go into this, your sister is the actress Didi Cohn, who is best known for playing Frenchie in Grease,
Right.
and Grease 2 and different incarnations of Grease. And
Mhm.
I just learned that your brother is an opera singer?
My brother, yes, my little brother, who
I did not know this.
Yeah, he's like 50 something now. But yes, he's an opera singer. Been with the Metropolitan Opera for the last 25, 6 years. Before that, he headlined all over the world. His signature role was Figaro back when he was younger.
Really?
What the hell are your
He actually
parents feeding you guys?
Well,
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to ask you. Like, do you come from artistic stock?
It's funny you guys asked that. My mom was a community theater director, like
Okay.
Jewish Community Center. I remember her dragging me around to.
I did theater at the Jewish Community Center in
Yeah.
St. Louis. That's exciting. I did. And taught theater. I actually taught theater
I
there.
thought you looked familiar.
And my dad was a clinical psychologist, but he was kind of very artistic. He was a woodworker, and he did a lot of artistic stuff. So I don't know. My grandmother, my mom's mom, was a wonderful. She could have been an opera singer, my grandmother, but she wasn't.
Really?
And then my little brother, God bless him, he's 8 years younger than me. He used to scream a lot as a child, so he kind of channeled that into opera singing later on in life. Yeah, he started with the L.A. Opera, by the way, so that's where he everything began.
LA Opera's terrific. I had actually never gone to the opera until maybe 8 or so years ago because my wife works in mainly TV and movie advertising.
Uh-huh.
But the agency she's with, one of their big clients is the LA Opera.
Mhm.
And she worked on a bunch of campaigns, and they got some tickets, and we just went. Neither one. Maybe she had gone. I had never gone before, and I wasn't sure if I would like it or not. But I had decided, no better way to try than when the tickets are being given to you.
That's what I say. Free
I loved
99.
I absolutely loved it, and I've been to now like 3 or 4 operas. I think it's really great, and of course. One of the operas that I was at, I wasn't able to go up to him and say hi, but of course, Powell was there.
Yeah, so it's just,
I happened to see Powell there because, of course, he
yeah,
was.
Powell and Placido Domingo, both being Spanish descent.
Yes.
Great friends. Powell and I had many discussions about the opera. Huge opera buff, as he
Because
is.
of course he is.
Yeah.
Like, if it requires intellect, he's a buff of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's an amazing guy, and been watching a lot of his Instagram lives that he's been doing, and he got married, as you guys know.
Yeah, I saw that.
His foot is all healed, and how much would we love to see him retire as a Laker? How unbelievable
that'd be
that
so cool.
I think he's actually, though, I think I saw on Twitter, and I apologize if I've got this info wrong, but I think he actually he's trying to set himself up to go back to Spain. And retire with that team in Spain. And set up to play for 2021.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, you might be right. He did say he wants to play in the Olympics next summer, which he wouldn't have been able to play this summer because of his foot.
Right.
So it kind of buys him a year to be healthier and go for another Olympics, which is amazing. His career is just incredible.
Yeah.
He just turned 40 last week, pal.
I like the old men like that. The old guys. This is one of the things that I think is interesting, because your role is one where you are around people a lot, but you're also, unless I'm just way off, you're also kind of not supposed to be somebody that they know is around a lot. So like, how long does it take to build a relationship with somebody like Pau, or like the one you have with Kobe, or that you've built throughout the years, given the nature of your job?
Well, Brian, it's funny. I think of myself as that annoying fly that is always around, but you don't really have the heart to swat him. Because
like a cartoon fly.
I like being the fly on the wall, and then Phil used to always. I knew when I overextended my welcome with Phil, because he would just give me that look like, okay, you're out. Get out of the locker room. I'm done with you, But with Phil and I had a wonderful relationship. But it took a little bit of moxie in my early years. I had to earn my way in, and specifically with Pat Riley, who was very reluctant, let's just say, of letting me in the inner sanctum. And quite frankly, if it wasn't for Gary Beatty, we probably wouldn't be speaking today, because Gary held the keys, to the locker room, to the training room. That was his domain. And Gary and I became friends. He kind of saw what I was trying to do, and I was kind of relentless and probably pretty annoying back then. So he just finally let me in the locker room. And Magic and James Worthy and all those guys, Coop, they all were wonderful and welcomed me in. And that kind of established a reputation, I guess. And when Kobe came along 13 years into my career, he had heard of my reputation and knew that I was with the team and could be trusted. And it's all about trust, as you guys know. In our world, if they don't trust you, you're not going to get an interview. You're not going to get anywhere close to them. I'm not going to get, a picture that I need. And if you burn that trust, it can never come back.
Hold on, Nate. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
sure.
like this is like this picture, for example, which is one I think people have seen a lot of. Like that's Kobe. I think 2010, I believe it is.
Yeah, 2010 in New York. Yeah,
and like there's a lot going on in that photo, but it's obviously a very private moment. Like, how long do you have to get in there and do that?
Well, the backstory on this is that I was embedded with the team from the 2009 and 10 season. Phil and I were working on our Journey to the Ring book, which was going to end however it ended. The publisher was committed to Phil and I doing this book, win, lose, or draw, quite frankly. If they won the championship, they didn't win the championship, they didn't even get to the finals, it really didn't matter. But it was supposed to be Phil's last season. He had announced that it was going to be his last season. So he agreed to write the book for me and with me. And so this was shot in January at Madison Square Garden. The Lakers had played the night before in Cleveland. You guys know really well what these back-to-backs are like on the long Grammy road trips. And it's grueling. It was the middle of this crazy 12-game trip or whatever it was. And he was beat up. Kobe was just beat up. He had played the night before. His ankles were beat up. His finger was broken in 3 places.
Yeah,
and any other guy.
That's one of my favorite parts of that picture. Is I think everybody's looking at the ankles and the ice and the legs. Is that he's got his finger in the cup.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That's what we call in photography, like second or third reading. Like you don't really see that. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
long story short, part of what I do is I kind of go through the locker room. I get some photos when I can. I have to be incredibly quiet and discreet. And he is meditating, getting himself, like literally willing himself to play in this game in Madison Square Garden, less than 24 hours when we were playing somewhere else. Any other guy maybe would have taken the night off, but as you know, MSG was like Mecca for him. And
He wasn't taking that night off.
Not that
no, he
night,
wasn't.
exactly.
He would have taken Cleveland off, but not that night
Yeah,
off.
yeah, and in many arenas, the newer arenas, he would have a room where he could go. I mean, I used to go with him into like room closets, or restrooms that weren't being used, or training rooms for the hockey team or whatever. MSG didn't have that, so he had to do his mental prep right in the middle of the busy locker room situation. So this is just before I left, 45 minutes before game time, and I turned and saw him. I just prayed that the shutter wouldn't disturb him, and it didn't. And this photo to me, I'm really glad, Brian, you brought this picture up, because this really, if there was one photo that defined the Mamba mentality to me personally, it would be this picture.
It's interesting too because Kobe was very active in creating his own mythology, and I just think mythology in general was something that was fascinating to him. Whether you're talking about his own that he actively earned and perpetuated, I think just mythology in general, and that's what led to I think his post-career interest in storytelling. Pictures like that help perpetuate the mythology. Have you ever thought about just the role that you played in that? Because there's a lot of visuals that are associated with Kobe that you were that lens.
Yeah, I never really gave it thought, quite honestly, until he and I started doing our book together. And he was very specific and eloquent about pictures that he remembered that I took that I didn't necessarily remember. And he, for example, we were putting together the chapter about who are his biggest defensive nemesis, Raja Bell and Bruce Bowen, and of course the Kobe stopper. We can't forget Ruben Patterson. Tony Allen. Those guys. And he said to me, I'll never forget. He said, Andy, he says, you remember that game 2000 whatever conference finals, and had Bruce Bowen on the baseline, and I turned my hip left and I went right and I dunked on his ass. He says, you have that picture, right? I said, yeah, I mean, I'll find it, And,
Did you?
But we found, we meaning myself, and,
sure.
because half of his career was pre-digital, so it was all filmed back then, and so I had to rely on some really good editors back at NBA Photos in New Jersey to help me with that. And we found about 90% of the stuff that he wanted. But to what you're saying, he was very conscious that photos really spoke to what he was trying to do on the court. Even photos of the greats. Like he would ask me out of the blue, he says, I need some pictures of my muses, my mentors, blah, blah, blah. And, I'd have to make pictures of Bird and Jordan and Magic and whoever. And then lo and behold, the next game I'd go in and he'd have them taped on his locker, because he would, as you know, he would get himself ready, face his locker, and he would stare at these photos. And he was just channeling greatness, I guess.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you remember the three of us worked on a project when Brian and I covered the Lakers for ESPN LA, the .com that used to exist there, and we did a photo-driven project where every member of the Lakers, right before the 2010 playoffs were about to begin, they all looked at different pictures of themselves during the 2009 run.
Right.
And, they all recalled their memories from it, like, what was going on in that picture and what, just what it was like to be in the middle of that. Because other than Ron Artest, everybody from the 2009 team was part of the 2010 team. Trevor Ariza left, Ron Artest replaced him. Right. And one of the last guys, if not the last guy we went to, was actually Kobe, because we were saving, we wanted to see how this was going before we actually went to Kobe. And B, we knew he would require the most amount. And two things that I still remember that stand out to me is his memory for all this stuff and the memory for details was spectacular. Like the minutia
like
that
like on an intimidating level. Like
Yeah, right. Yeah.
you needed to be really set and with what you were coming with because he knew if you were wrong.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he knew the absolute precise details of every single one of these photos. And we showed him photos of, like you said, other Laker greats, and I think a couple with Michael Jordan and whatever, just to get his thoughts on those as well. But the other thing that we still remember is when we asked Kobe for the time, we didn't have a lot of requests from Kobe over the years, but this was one that took like probably 20-ish minutes, which is a good chunk of time to ask of him. Yeah. And when we told him what the project was, he thought it was really cool. He thought it was a really cool idea. But he also said, anything for Andy. Like, if it's for Andy, I'll do it. As opposed to anything for the Kamenetzky brothers.
Right.
Which is not what he said.
He meant you, Andy. He wasn't talking about me, Andy.
No, I'm pretty sure.
No, that is not what we meant.
But and I bring all this up also, too, just outside of just a fun thing for the three of us to have worked on, you really saw his appreciation for photography as an art. Like he genuinely thought that it was cool to go through these photos and that like, it was a worthwhile use of his time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the tenets and the pillars of the Mamba mentality is curiosity. He was curious about everything. He was curious about what you do. He was curious about what I do. We had conversations about, why are you using that lens? Like why do you shoot from there? What were you thinking? And it's really funny because I talked to Tim Grover on my podcast, who trained Michael Jordan, and we saw him in The Last Dance, and then he trained Kobe as well. And there was so many similarities between the two of them. But Tim said the biggest thing, the difference was that Michael could care less about the why. He didn't care why Tim was doing this exercise or having him lift these weights. That's all Kobe cared about. Kobe knew what the end result was going to be because he had a great trainer, but he wanted to know why, and that was his relentless curiosity about everything. And it was fascinating to me.
And I'm always interested, too, with people that he respected and he worked with artistically. When he locked you into the Muse cage, what did he feed you and how often?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I still am kind of scratching my head a little bit about that. He definitely had something in mind. He had built this whole miniature sort of world in his office. And then I came down to do a shoot with him. And, I think he was going through a little bit of withdrawal, I guess, from the game. But other than that, I don't really have much of a comment about it.
Well, we always used to love
we Andy and I, just with all the respect that we have for Kobe, and just because he would just, and I respect the Muse case. Like this is my idea, and I'm going to go do it. And there's this weird snake there, and it's purple, and I don't care. And
we
he's
used
going
to
to go do
picture
it
as basically like something out of Saw, where where basically he would take all the people like you. Who he respected and inspired him, and he would just lock them in the cage until he extracted everything that he needed from them.
Kobe's version of Space Jam, instead of sucking out like the basketball essence of Charles Barkley and like all of those guys, he would have sucked out like the essence of you and of Steven Spielberg and of Oprah,
John Williams.
You're right. That's just because it goes back to that curiosity.
Yeah.
Well, this is one of the great stories of curiosity that I've had, at least in the time covering Kobe. Years ago, Brian and I did an interview for our ESPN podcast with a documentary filmmaker who directed this movie called Iro Dreams of Sushi, about this guy, sushi maker, Iro, and I don't remember his full name. But he's considered like the
Robinson
greatest.
Is his last name.
He's considered the greatest sushi maker in Japan. Like he is an icon of sushi, and he has this exacting process, and he is the legend of sushi. Yeah. And when we were interviewing this director, and his name, I think his name is David Gelb, but I'm not 100% sure that's correct. But he said that Kobe actually cold called him. To talk with him about that documentary. And it was in part because he was, I believe it's around when he was making Kobe's own Muse documentary.
Yeah.
So he
right.
wanted to get perspectives from different documentaries. I'm sure David Gelb wasn't the only one that he called, but also too, the exacting nature of this sushi maker was something that obviously spoke to Kobe.
Yeah.
So he wanted to learn more about this guy because Kobe was so much about process and methodology and the why with everything. And, you know, this director said, like, you know, when he first gets this call that it's Kobe, he's like, yeah, right, whatever.
Yeah, right.
Like, you know, and then he's like, oh my God, like Kobe just called me.
Yeah.
But this is stuff that Kobe used to do. I mean,
sure.
You know, Brian and I used to joke that it's not cold calling when it's Kobe because you know everyone's going to take his call.
Yeah, sure.
But most people wouldn't do it. Most people wouldn't feel the need to do it
because he just needed to. He needed to understand how other people ticked who are on the same level as him. I mean, you know, it's legendary. He calls up Deepak Chopra. He calls up Barack Obama. I think he called John Williams like in the middle of the night or something. And, you know, we know how that ended with them working on Dear Basketball together and when he kind of worked together. So, you know, when you're at that level of greatness, there aren't that many people, you know, flying in that same stratosphere as you. And he was always fascinated with that, and I respected that. You know, I wish that we had him around longer so we could pick his brain now. You know, as one of the Yodas of our world, but you know, we don't, unfortunately.
I want to show you this one too, because and Mike, a couple questions about this as I fumble with my phone and the buttons. This is another one that I think so many people have seen, and it really gets to, you know, that era and you know, the Lakers versus the Celtics and Bird versus Magic and all of this, and everything about it is just, you know, the contrasting colors of the uniforms. Like the Lakers Celtics worked on so many levels as a basketball fan. I wonder though, like what was different about like this era, like literally in terms of like how you had to do your job, like. This, you know, this versus the way you do it now, and then, you know, we have more questions about just, you know, this era, but part of the, you know, you talk about process with Kobe, like what's the process here?
Well, I think we talked about this way back. I talked about with you guys that, you know, back in that era, Magic and Bird never guarded each other. I mean, they didn't switch, they didn't guard. You know, what was a guard, what was a forward. And, you know, Coop was either on Larry or sometimes Worthy. But so the only time I could get these dudes in the same frame was either the 5-minute captain meeting before the game, right, where they would come out and shake hands and linger maybe for like 5 seconds and talk to each other, or a free throw situation, which this is. You know, then they happen to line up next to each other facing me, which they could have been facing the other way. And maybe I come back with 3 pictures of them in the same frame, and it's super frustrating. And but the fact that, you know, that this picture does exist, there's another one that was shot in '87 at Boston Garden. David Stern used to point to this picture and say, you know, this helped define that era. You know, and when your boss tells you that, that's kind of pretty high praise. But, you know, I don't approach my work any differently, Brian, than I did back in the day. You know, whether it's, you know, LeBron and Steph Curry during the 4 finals that those guys played against each other, or, you know, it's Kobe against Paul Pierce or whoever, you know, I'm going to still approach it the same way as I did back with Magic and Bird.
But like, you know, like are the toys different? Like what's, you know, obviously the format is different. You talked about digital versus film. I mean, it's like how do you take the same process and pour it into some of the cool stuff that you get to use now that you didn't have available then?
Well, the craft is the same. I mean, my approach, my preparation is the same. The way I set up for games, you know, like you said, the toys have changed. The technology has changed. We've gone from film to digital. We've gone from manual focus to autofocus. You know, cameras kind of do a lot for you, but you have to know what they do, and you have to have your instinctive eye and your experience. And most of all, I'll just say it again, is preparation.
Right.
I prepare for every game the same way. Yeah, I'm doing more now than I did, my first 5 to 10 years of doing this. But I have help. I have a great team behind me, a couple of great assistants who know how to set up all this stuff. Gary Beatty and I had a great conversation on my podcast last week about that he remembers when, I had 2 cameras and that was it. Now, I have, he jokes about the cases of equipment I'd have to put on the.
Yeah, we've seen that.
And all that stuff. And you even have your own dolly that you have to slow.
You look like you're about to go to war.
I know. It's
before these games start up. It's ridiculous. Pretty intense.
Right. But the approach is the same, just like, the players have gone from short shorts to long shorts, but the game is still the same, right? The attire might be a little different.
Go ahead, Andy.
This might be a really broad question, but I'm just curious what the answer is. Beyond the moment itself, whenever you're shooting, what are you trying to capture? Is there a common factor that if a shot turns out well and pleases you, that you notice?
Well, I'm always thinking about the viewer. So what is somebody going to get from my picture? My goal as a photographer, and pretty much any photographer, I think, would say that the ultimate goal is to elicit an emotional response from the viewer. So if you look at one of my pictures and go, "Whoa, that's cool," or "I was there for that," or "I remember seeing that on TV," and there's the still picture of it, then that means a lot to me, and it's thrilling. I have to be very locked in with the way I work because I can only shoot one picture every 4 seconds because of this whole strobe thing I got in the ceiling. So I can't do a motor drive sequence. But like these photos you're showing are like real moments in time that the older ones, have acquired kind of a status of being around for a long time and kind of speak for themselves. And, it's very gratifying to me, especially this one, Michael with his first trophy. And they spent a lot of time in The Last Dance talking about this moment, about this picture. There's so many backstories and things going on with this photo. It's just thrilling to me that my work can be a thread and can kind of live on and be the legacy of the league,
Right.
And it's very cool, actually.
And the context of this photo obviously changed so much too. I mean, it was a powerful photo when it was taken, but then obviously becomes more so afterwards. How often does that happen? I mean, I'm sure that happens a lot when people look now differently at your photos of Kobe.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it in the moment that this had to be an important picture that I had to take because it was Michael's first championship. It's a very cool moment. And the sort of backstory to this is, as a lot of people know, is that there was just pandemonium going on in the visitors' locker room at the Forum, which was like the size of this room I'm in, and the team, they did the trophy presentation on live TV. They went to commercial. They had to find Michael he had taken the trophy from the stage, this impromptu stage that they built. And the only vantage point I had was on top of a bridge table in the middle of the locker room, just so I could see above everybody. And something just instinctively just told me to look to my left, which I did. And there he was, like maybe 3 feet from me with his dad, with the trophy. I banged off a couple of shots, and I think somebody grabbed him, but the moment was over at that point. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you gotten his reaction on it?
Oh yeah, for sure. After his dad was murdered, maybe about 6-9 months later, I got a call from his office that said, "Would you mind, sending a signed print to Michael? So he would like to hang this in his office in his house, I guess." And that, that's only happened to me maybe 2 or 3 times in my career that a guy has actually requested a photo.
Well, especially too, that he had you sign it.
Yeah,
I think is really interesting too, because obviously, given the tragic context of it, I'm sure that I would think that asking to sign it might have been a bit of a surprise, like that he would ask for the photo
Yeah.
maybe not as much, but the actual signature, I think is it's a touching show of respect.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so much behind this photo. You know, he's there with his dad, obviously. His dad, James, and my dad met each other during the whole Dream Team experience. They became sort of friends, you know, during that whole thing, you know, and Michael had his relationship with his dad, which was very, very close. I had with my dad. So we had this sort of unspoken father-son thing. You know, I lost my dad after this picture was taken, but, you know, it's just very poignant. And, you know, there's just the emotion that he's showing in this picture, in this moment, just speaks volumes. You know, we just watched a 10-part series where he like put his emotions out there to the world. And this maybe was one of the first times that I think any of us really ever saw that side of him. You know, Michael was very close to the vest with his emotions. So, you know, maybe that has something to do with it, but also the moment. I mean, none of us knew there were going to be 5 more after this, right? But we knew this had to be sort of the passing of the torch.
And unfortunately, none of us, you know, knew what was to come for Michael Jordan personally, you know, with his father in that moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Too. I mean, it's just, there's a lot happening there.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, the tragedy of it notwithstanding, like you were saying before, it's a gratifying feeling, I'm sure, just to know that moment gets captured for everybody, you know, and you were there to do it. I mean, it means something to people.
Yeah, and, you know, whether it's ever talked about between Michael and I, we'll have this photo will kind of, you know, be something between us. You know, Magic and I, same thing. You know, Shaq and I, his early career in Orlando, there's a lot of pictures that I was able to shoot. And of course, you know, 20 years with the Mamba. So, you know, it's amazing to be able to have a camera as an instrument, but a way to be a connection to a person and to have documented their career. You know, whether, I don't know, early in my career, I never even thought of it because I was so driven in my career to just keep moving forward in my career. Now I'm able to kind of sit back and look at it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Like, was there a point at which you realized that, okay, like, I've been the person who has communicated a lot of these moments, like these times where that transfer or whatever it is that you're talking about. When did that happen? Where you started to understand that?
It kind of happened after Magic had to suddenly retire, and I realized that I had this body of work of a career that was just cut way too short, too soon. You know, that's when the light bulb went off. That, wow, you know, I was there for almost his entire career. I think I started in his second season. And then, of course, you know, when Kareem retired, it's kind of the same thing because I was there towards, you know, the end, but there were a couple of championships. And, of course, with MJ, and then, you know, really got solidified with Kobe because, you know, I remember being with him on that last game that he played and just thinking, wow, I mean, how many games have I shot of this guy and been with him and not even given it a second thought? And then, you know, when that buzzer goes off after 48 minutes, that's it. I'm never going to see him on the court again. So I had to really kind of take that in. It was pretty interesting.
It's like essentially being a still documentarian.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. That was one of the big pushes on the book that I was trying to get him and his people to really understand is that there were a lot of pictures out there that hadn't. There are a lot of pictures that had been seen and been published, but there are a lot of pictures that hadn't been published because, you know, I just had shot so much of him, and so much of what I shot was on film and was not scanned and just sitting in an archive. So my original idea about the book was to kind of unearth a lot of these never before seen photos. Of course, that's not the book he wanted to do, but we ended up doing the book he wanted to do, but which was fine.
Shocking! I wouldn't have seen it go in that direction.
Yeah, but he was right, and you know, when hearing it from him, when he
said, didn't win that one, Andy. I wouldn't have seen that coming.
No, he said, Andy, I got good news and I got bad news. The good news is we're going to do a book together. The bad news, we're not doing that book. No, it's a true story. But he very graciously kind of maneuvered me away from what I was thinking about, but because he had a story to tell, he wanted people to see what made the Black Mamba, right? And none of us really understood that. As much as we've been around him, he never really kind of said it in his own words. He let his work sort of speak for itself. But he wanted to then, through writing about it and then illustrated through my photos, he wanted it to come out in that way.
Well, he did the same thing to Gotham Chopra, and it worked out well in that case too. So,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm interested to like you do. I mean, you shoot all kinds of stuff, and like when you do something like a concert. And this is for people who can't totally tell. That's like Madonna sitting on a bunch of people.
What is going on in that picture?
I'll get rid of the bottom third there, and you can really see it. It's like it's Madonna sitting on. I'm assuming are like her dance crew. It's like a bunch of dudes.
Yeah. Right.
As right. One does.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, you have a bunch of.
Hold on. Where did you find this picture, by the way?
On your website.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay.
You should go visit it. You'd probably like the stuff on it.
It's really there's lots of great concerts in there. I made a mistake in uploading, but I had a couple Elton John pictures in there and some other stuff, and like they're really cool and they're and all that. But like, is there something different about doing this when you're shooting entertainers versus when you're shooting basketball players? What's similar? What's different?
Well, quite honestly, this is a lot easier. I'm shooting with a long lens from. I'm pretty sure this was at a Grammys at Staples Center. And that's what myself and my group we shoot all that stuff that happens that are non-sports as well as all the sports inside Staples. So I'm given a seat and I have a long lens and I just shoot. And in this case, I'm able to shoot with a motor drive. So, you can sort of edit out the shots that are maybe out of focus or she's got her eyes closed or the lights are in the wrong place or whatever. So it's a much different approach. I'm much more, I don't want to say connected, but I'm much more involved when I'm sitting, right under the basket with these gigantic guys like flying over my head.
Right.
Do you happen to remember if all the dancers got out okay?
I mean, that doesn't look comfortable. I'm not going to lie.
No, that looks awful. That looks real. Like, I'm kind of claustrophobic. That looks terrible. It's Andy, like my worst nightmare.
Andy, what about this photo where you captured the iconic Norman Fell? Can you take us through the process here?
I love Norman Fell, but no, I didn't take the picture. So
someone needed to fix Norm's collar.
Right.
Norman Fell's collar.
But it's a certain naturalism which you allowed to happen here, which I really respect, Andy.
What show was this from?
That's Three's Company. Yeah.
Oh, of course, that's right. He was the landlord, right?
Yeah, Mr. Roper.
Yeah, Mr. Roper. Right. A little bit before my time, fellas.
Well, before ours too, but
I mean, you start breaking
respectfully, you're older than us.
Right.
Breaking out like the Dick Van Dyke Show or something. I wasn't shooting back at those.
I love I love Three's Company. You don't have to apologize. Never make it before your time.
We know, like for the fans of the podcast, fans of the old, they know we'll work shrimp on a treadmill and anything. We will work Norman Fell into every show that we possibly can. This was easy. This was an easy one.
You've been inside too long, fellas. You got to get out.
We have been inside
unquestionably
way too
true.
And one of the things, though, that makes it easier to be inside as long as we have been is vsliquor.com, Andy, because it's the most convenient way to get your alcohol delivered to your door. The pandemic can make you want to drink a little bit. So anything you want right here, one click on its way. And right now, Andy, if you type out sports.
Okay, hold on. Get out my phone here.
Okay. Sports with the first order, you get 15% off. So vsliquor.com, go top shelf. You've earned it.
And if you're lucky, it will be delivered by the great Norman Fell. Hand delivered. I can't guarantee that, and the people at VS Liquor won't guarantee that either.
I can actually promise you it won't be.
Has he passed?
He's long since passed.
Oh. Yeah, so if you find that he does delete it, then you actually should call someone because it's not okay.
Like,
Godspeed, Norman Fell.
Oh God, you guys are too much.
yeah, let me look up the exact. Yes, he left us in 1998, so I'm quite confident it's not going to be Norman Fell delivering.
I did have a
UPS
feeling.
liquor.
I had a feeling, but I wasn't. I didn't want to bury the man. I wasn't totally positive. He was probably 78 when I took the picture that I just put up there, which was probably 45 years old.
What TV shows did you guys watch growing up? What was like
Three's
your favorite?
Company, among others.
Yeah, we watched the Three's Company.
I actually, I'm like a Good Times savant.
Oh, there you go.
Like I know Good Times exceptionally well.
Yeah.
What else did I watch?
We were children of NBC's must see Thursday lineup. Like I think that's a really good way of all the way from the different incarnations of it. The different times it was Cosby Show, Family Ties, Cheers. Night Court was in there for a little while. What else? Like
Cheers, Shelley Long, or Cheers, Kirstie Alley?
Both.
Okay.
It came on the air.
Yeah.
I think it first came on the air when I was about 10 or 11, something like that. Cheers.
Yeah.
It ran for, I think, 11, 13 years, something like that.
Yeah, I went to UMass, and all my friends were from Boston, obviously, and the biggest thrill was going to the Cheers bar when I would go home with one of my buddies for the weekend and go right. I mean, it looked exactly the same. It was decorated. It was a guy that actually looked like Norm sitting at the end of the bar. It was so bizarre.
That's funny.
Yeah,
that's really funny. Yeah, I grew up watching all those shows. I remember one time there was an episode of Family Ties where one of Alex's friends gets hooked on basically like diet pills, but like it's like I don't know, like meth light. Like you're taking diet pills. If you take enough of them, it turns into like speed. Essentially, it has the effect of being like sped up and sped out. And I realized that I had an essay that was due the next day for an English class that I hadn't even started. And I realized this as I was watching an episode of Family Ties at like 1 a.m. And I basically cribbed the plot of that Family Ties, but I wrote it as if I was the character who had this watered down speed habit, and turned it into my teacher, who said that it was like one of the bravest essays that he had ever read in his entire time teaching. And then I had to really explain to him, like, look, I'd prefer that you kept this to yourself. We're trying to work this out internally in my family. Because I was really worried that he was going to say something to someone. They're going to be like, what are you talking about? He doesn't do that. Like,
we got Family Ties last night.
Yeah, exactly. Alex's friend Effie. That's what this happened.
You would have been screwed if was that for Brian Taylor? Or,
I believe it was for Brian Taylor.
Well, there was probably a 0% chance he was watching it.
Well, he was just daffy enough that you could pull it off. This teacher we had, it was kind of a British stoner, and he wasn't paying too much attention.
Not to anything. No. So when did you actually start shooting stuff? Like, how did that happen?
Well, I was 14 and my dad bought me a camera, and we took a trip. Grew up in Brooklyn. We took a trip to all the national parks out west that summer, my 14th year. And I just took to it. It was such a, I don't know, such a thing where I just felt like I was creating something in the camera. And, it was a manual camera. I had to learn how to do exposure and, of course, focus and all that. And my dad was very encouraging. And then I came home and started, I think it was my junior year in high school. It was my sophomore year in high school, and my friend had a darkroom in his basement, and he showed me how the magic happened. The first time I saw a print come up in the print tray, it was like that was the end of that, because I just couldn't believe that I could create something that would literally appear in front of my face, And so I always had a camera with me in high school. I ended up going to UMass, and we had a daily newspaper, which I worked for, but wasn't really learning the craft, and the science of photography. So I made a tough decision in the middle of my junior year to transfer to Art Center in Pasadena, where I was literally the black sheep of my class because sports photography is what I wanted to do. and that was totally not encouraged, to say the least. They wanted all of us to be, studio photographers, commercial photographers, advertising, cars, fashion. I didn't like any of that stuff. I wanted to shoot games. But I had two teachers that believed in me and are still good friends, still mentors. One of them really opened a major door by introducing me to a Sports Illustrated photographer. And everything just started happening because I started to learn how to put these strobe systems into indoor arenas like the Forum. Very few of us knew how to do that in the country. And, that door was cracked open a little bit, and the Brooklyn and me kind of opened it up a little bit more. And next thing I know, I was shooting the '83 All-Star game at the Forum for the NBA, and that was my first gig. So, but I also want to backtrack just a little bit because you brought up my sister, Dee Dee, who was in Greece. And that summer of '77, I went to visit her while she was making Grease. I was out in LA the whole summer, and I ended up hanging around the set, which, I had nothing else to do. So I just hung around and I became friends with the unit photographer, who was a very famous studio photographer named Alan Pape. He shot the unit photographer, is the guy who's there every single day, recording on stills. And he encouraged me to bring my camera, which I did. And I was taking pictures on the set, Travolta and Sha-Na-Na and my sister, of course. And he would look at my pictures and was very encouraging. So the message of that is, to seek out somebody who will kind of push you, and encourage you. And he did that. And I'll never forget it. I don't know if I would have had the guts to apply to Art Center after that, which I did because of him.
You said there that you got to shoot the '83 All-Star game. Maybe there's a lot of stuff that kind of went in between. Could that have happened today? Like, it seems like you were still relatively new at this. You weren't, you. Now let's come have Andy Bernstein shoot the All-Star game. Does that kind of reflect some luck in terms of where the NBA was at that point in 1983?
Oh yeah, well the '83 All-Star game was a game. It wasn't a weekend. It was a game on a Sunday afternoon. I mean, that was it. And the PR director for the Lakers at the time, I'm pretty sure it was a guy named Bruce Jolish. It wasn't Josh Rosenfeld just yet. And he took me aside in November of '82. Season had just started. And he said, "Hey, Andy, we're going to have the All-Star game here on some Sunday in February. And maybe they need a photographer."
Maybe.
I said, "You think so?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "You going back to New York for Thanksgiving?" I said, "Yeah." So he said, "Well, why don't you go talk to this guy?" He knew the person to talk to. So I wrote the guy a letter. His name was Porter McKinnon. At the time, the NBA only published one publication. It was called NBA Today. It was like a tabloid publication on newsprint that came out. Even if it was NBA Today, it was like NBA like this month. It came out like once a month. And I wrote him a letter, and he said, "Yeah, sure, come in." And I brought my little measly portfolio with me, and I remember I went up to the league office, which at that time the league office was on Fifth Avenue in the same building it's in now, but it was like half of a corridor. It wasn't like the entire Olympic Tower, which it is now, plus 900 other offices all over the world. And he said, "So what can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, I'm hearing you're going to have the All-Star game there in February in LA." And he says, "Let me understand something. You live in LA?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "So we don't have to travel? You don't have to like feed you or anything?" And I said, "No." He says, "Will you work cheap?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, yeah, we'll hire you." We didn't even think of having a photographer. I swear to God, that's what happened. I said, "Okay, great." I don't even think I quoted him a price. It was ridiculous. So the next thing I know, I'm standing there on the court, Marvin Gaye's singing like the most iconic anthem in the history of any national anthem at any sporting event. And I'm turning around and I'm seeing all of these guys. And I'm thinking, this is pretty cool.
Well, you mentioned that anthem, which, at the time was actually quite controversial.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's considered now this landmark moment in terms of like artistic reinterpretation and
right.
This really iconic signature, visual with the sunglasses. But
yeah,
in the moment, to put it mildly, it was polarizing. Do you remember your reaction to seeing it just presented this differently?
Yeah, I remember that it went on for a long time. It was like 5.5 minutes.
Oh yeah.
And after about 3.5 minutes, I did turn around and I saw the guys were kind of bopping, and the crowd was into it and clapping, and it was, to me, it was incredibly cool. What a moment! And sometime you guys have to talk to Lon Rosen about that whole situation, because Lon, I don't want to ruin it for Lon, but in a nutshell, Lon was in charge of getting the anthem singer, and Marvin Gaye did not rehearse. Literally walked down the aisle, center court, asked for the microphone, like as they went live on CBS.
Well, there was a huge stretch they weren't sure he was going to show up. Like,
right.
Well, I mean,
right.
Marvin Gaye. I mean, to be honest, went through periods where he was kind of unreliable. He went through a lot of personal issues. Before his unfortunate end and the tragedy with that. But I mean, Marvin Gaye was a very sensitive person, very in a lot of ways troubled person. But and a lot of singers like that, they can be sometimes a mystery as to whether or not they're going to be there, what exactly they're going to do on stage.
Yeah.
And it's funny too that like the league, given where they were and what they were, I'm just really sort of thinking about this in real time, but like the idea of given where they were and the things that they were trying to clean up, among them the perception that they were too black and too drugged out a league, actually bringing in Marvin Gaye to sing an anthem is, I never really thought about it as kind of a ballsy moment and like a ballsy decision for where they were.
Absolutely. I mean, it could have gone really bad. And I know that Lon, the only backup they had, I think, was the Laker band.
Yeah. The USC band.
Seriously, yeah. I think it took a lot of guts on Lon's part, and for the league also to just say, okay, let's do it. Now it's absolutely iconic.
Yeah, my favorite. I don't like. There are I don't think there are stories in sports that I love more than what the NBA was in the '80s. Stories in the '70s, and the stories of Jerry West and Elgin Baylor driving around like trying to give away tickets in the back of his truck. Like,
right.
this is Elgin Baylor and Jerry West, to the finals being on tape delay, and all that stuff. It's like, it's so inconceivable now,
yeah. I mean, Elgin Baylor told me the story once about the Laker plane that went down in the cornfield in Iowa. They thought they were done. I mean, they all laid down in the aisle, thought, this is it. We're never coming back.
So, like, along those lines, when you're getting started out shooting the NBA, are you even confident that this is a job of longevity? Given, I mean, for real,
it's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great. I didn't even think about that. I felt like, I was shooting a professional league that had been around a while. The games were on TV. I mean, of course, they were tape delayed. They were tape delaying
3 days later, but sure.
But I had made some very, very good friends very quickly in the NBA, and we were all young and eager, and '84 David Stern came in, and we all kind of rallied around Uncle David. He had this vision. And I started working very closely with Rick Welts, who is kind of the architect of All-Star Weekend, which just catapulted the league. And Rick was very much behind the whole Dream Team invention and what that meant, and really brilliant people. I mean, the people who started NBA Entertainment, Don Sperling, Barry Winnick, who was the father of my two great friends, Michael Winnick and Peter Winnick, who are videographers for years for the NBA, and their brother Greg, who ran NBA Entertainment. I mean, these were all very, very creative, forward-thinking people, and I felt really, grateful to be part of that. But I also felt like I had a job to do to sort of complement what they were doing. That was part of that machine.
What was your relationship like with David Stern?
He was an incredible motivator. Um, I always really get very nostalgic talking about David because he was very encouraging to me as a young photographer. I'm just like this young, punky, you know, guy who's always in the way. But he was very clear that he wanted me at the big events. And as NBA Entertainment grew and my role at the NBA got bigger, and then myself and Terry Lyons, who you guys might know, we went to Gary Bettman, who was the deputy commissioner at the time, and David in 1986 to create NBA photos. No league had a division that was only devoted to photography, and they embraced that. And David he just kind of gave us the keys and said, "Hey, do what you got to do, but we want to archive our league. We want to go back in time and get material that will archive the history of the league. But we also want to be the sort of the clearinghouse for everything on the still side for photography moving forward." And that's how NBA Photos was formed, and it continues today.
So fast forward, I don't know, 40 years. What is the photography experience going to be in the bubble? Like, how is the NBA handling this?
Yeah, well, I have some colleagues that are down there now. So NBA Photos has kind of done sort of waves of photographers going in. So the first wave is deeply, ensconced down there. And what I'm hearing is that, social distancing is really the key, that they want us, as far away from the players and them as far away from us as possible, but we're still able to do our job, which you can see in all the social media posts that are coming out on the various platforms that, our photographers are not right on top of them like we usually are, but, the photography is coming out and looking really good, both in the NBA and in the WNBA bubbles. And by the time I get there, I'll be there in mid-August. It'll be pretty much the start of the second round of the playoffs by the time I clear quarantine. So, the regular season will be finished. There'll be 16 teams. They'll be pared down to second round. So hopefully it'll be more like a more normal way of covering games, although nothing down there is going to be normal, There are not going to be any people in the stands. It's going to be really bizarre. Not going to be any traveling, which is going to be weird too. So we'll have to see.
Bad. Is this a place where the technology comes in handy? Where because you have to work with fewer people and the restrictions are there. Is that helpful?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we at any regular game, I'm doing 7 or 8 remote cameras, which we're going to continue to do. There's a lot of discussion about us not shooting on the court because the social distancing issues and, player falls on us or whatever, how close we are. So we might have to shoot a little bit away from the court from a more elevated angle, which, creates some different ways of shooting. And you're shooting into empty seats, which, isn't always the greatest, photographically. So there's going to be some creative work done technically, with our lighting for one thing, but also from angles and the type of lenses we use and choices we make from where we shoot from.
I mean, the flip side, though, is these photos are truly going to emerge as you will automatically know what playoffs these were from.
Yeah.
It's going to be pretty stark and I think really striking when as much as there's going to be challenges from not having fans there. I mean, the flip side is I think the visual is going to be incredibly striking and unique.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I saw something really funny on the news this morning that baseball in some stadiums are using cutouts of fans.
It's part of it's a revenue thing, so they pay for that.
That's just crazy to me.
I think though that's actually going to a Dodgers Foundation or something.
But point is, it's either revenue, it's charity, whatever it is. But it's a way to kind of drive. And the Cubs are actually, I think, piping in audio of fans.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, by the way, as a side note, were I really, really wealthy, just had FU money, I would buy at least 3 sections of cutouts of myself.
And Norman Fell.
And Norman Fell. It would be me sitting
whole
with
section of Norman Fell.
it'd be me sitting with the great Norman Fell, who
Yeah,
we all
right.
wish was still with us. Like,
You'd have to
could
get
you
him in
do
all
that?
different kinds of situations. Like
right.
jumping up and down.
I would think that if you're rich enough to rent out 3 sections, they're going to let you do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
That's true.
Like if they realize you're some type of weirdo who wants it to be just you and Norman Fell, if you're going to pay for 3 sections, have at it. Go nuts.
Well, the biggest thing that I'm curious about is when whatever team wins the championship, and what it's like when a team wins the championship, either at home or away. It's like bedlam and chaos on the court, and fans and confetti and the whole thing. I mean, what's that going to be like? Who knows? I don't know. We'll have to see.
Andy, did you want to sneak in the game before
Yes.
we had to go? All right.
Yes, as mentioned a couple times, Andy's sister is Dee Dee Cohn, the great actress. You know her from like decades of work, but in particular, you know her as Frenchie from Grease. So I've got a Grease quiz for Andy and Brian to compete against. It's not like your name is your buzzer. You don't have to rush.
no?
I'm just gonna.
Okay.
Nope. Just gonna be trading off. I'll first ask Brian a question. Brian will give the answer first, then Andy. I'll tell you who's right or wrong. Then Andy will go first. Blah blah blah. So
Are there prizes involved in this?
the
Yes.
prize, Andy, is you got to be involved with the show.
The prize is if you order from VS Liquor for the first
That's
time,
what
you
I
get
was
15% off
Oh,
your first order
okay.
by entering sports.
Okay.
You got it, Andy. I need you to pay attention here, Andy. He's
right.
teeing us up because
Oh, my bad.
Andy Bernstein is no longer just a Hall of Fame photographer. He's also
That's
a
true.
podcast professional who understands
I
you
should have
have
given
to
the guy
do the reads.
Should have given the guy way more credit than that.
Yeah.
That's an amateur move on my part. So to begin, Brian,
Yes.
all 4 of the actors that I'm about to name were understudies at some point during the original Broadway run of Grease.
True.
Which of them, however, was never an understudy for the role of Danny Zuko?
Right.
Richard Gere, Patrick Swayze, Treat Williams, John Travolta. Brian goes first.
I was really hoping there would be a woman in there. Would have made it easier. I'll say Travolta. I think it's kind of a trick question.
Andy.
I would say Travolta too.
You are both correct. You
Nice.
are both quite savvy. John Travolta was the understudy to Duty, but
That's right.
never actually played Danny Zuko during that Broadway run. Next one,
Good one, Brian.
Andy goes first. Which of these dance sequences from Grease was filmed in one day? Grease Lightning, You're the One That I Want, Hopelessly Devoted to You, Beauty School Dropout.
Beauty School Dropout.
That seems awfully elaborate. I'll say Hopelessly Devoted to You.
Oh, you're both wrong. And this shocked me. You're the One That I Want.
Really? With all those people?
Yes, it was filmed in one day.
I was there, and you're right. It was. You know why? Because she couldn't get in and out of those pants more than once.
Yes, yeah. They
She
really
was like
needed the extra.
literally zipped in there.
Yes.
And couldn't get out.
Actually, Andy, from what I read, she was sewed in. They actually sewed Olivia Newton-John into those leather pants.
Yeah,
So they didn't have time to screw around.
and it's a very elaborate scene, as you remember, because they go in the fun house and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
it's a lot to get done.
Exactly.
Wow.
So still 1-1.
I've never been sewn into pants before.
Yeah, but people appreciate when you wear pants.
That's true.
Which of these songs from Grease was
Especially my wife.
was nominated for an Oscar? Grease Lightning, You're the One That I Want, Hopelessly Devoted to You, Beauty School Dropout.
I'm going to say Hopelessly
Brian.
Devoted to You.
I
Andy.
would say that too. Because that was an original song.
You're both correct. Hopelessly Devoted for You was nominated for an Oscar, so 2 for 2.
Yeah.
Grease was notorious for having cast members that were way older than the high schoolers that they were actually playing. Which among these actors...
Norman Fell actually played a high schooler in that movie.
Which among these cast members was actually the oldest? Jamie Donnelly, who played Jan, Michael Tucci, who played Sonny, Annette Charles, who played Cha-Cha, the dancer from the other school with the bad reputation, or Stockard Channing, who played Rizzo. Andy goes first.
I would say Michael Tucci.
Brian.
Stockard Channing was like 48 when she did that movie.
You are correct. It is Stockard Channing.
Yeah.
I almost said that, but
She was well into her 30s, I believe.
She was 33 years old when she played Rizzo. The other actors, Jamie Donnelly was 30 as Jan, Michael Tucci, 31 as Sonny, Annette Charles, 29 as Cha-Cha. Your sister, Dee Dee, relatively young at 25 to be playing a high school.
Yeah, she was like the junior in that.
Yes, although not quite. Which, though, among these cast members was the youngest playing their character? Dinah Manoff playing Marty, Lorenzo Lamas playing Tom the Jock, Eddie Deason playing Eugene the Geek, Kelly Ward playing Putsy. Andy goes first.
I would say Dinah Manoff.
Brian.
I have no clue. I'll say Eddie Deason.
Oh, you're both wrong. Lorenzo Lamas, 19 years old when he played Tom the Jock. Couple more of these.
First of all, I can never send this clip to my sister because she'll kill me that I don't know any of this stuff.
John Travolta said in an interview that this pop singer had been considered for Sandy. Brian goes first. Linda Ronstadt, Stevie Nicks, Carly Simon, or Debbie Harry?
That is a wildly different movie with Stevie Nicks in that role. The answer is not Stevie Nicks, or shouldn't be if she was considered. She was quickly not considered. I'll say Linda Ronstadt.
Andy.
Man, I would have to say Debbie Harry.
Ooh, Brian, correct. It is Linda Ronstadt who, my God.
Linda Ronstadt,
yeah,
she would have been good. But not Stevie Nicks.
Two more of these. Adjusted for inflation, Greece's lifetime domestic gross over under 650 million. Andy goes first.
Definitely over.
Brian.
Under.
Oh, Andy catching up. It is over 651 million.
Yeah,
and
good.
Final question, Brian up 4-3, but Andy, as luck would have it, this last one is worth 2, just randomly. Go figure.
All right.
Which is John Travolta's biggest hit, adjusted for inflation? Grease or Saturday Night Fever? Brian goes first.
I think Saturday Night Fever.
Andy.
I'd have to say Grease.
Andy wins. It is Grease.
Oh.
Saturday Night Fever is 570 million. His third, I believe, is Look Who's Talking with adjusted for inflation, 317. Wow. Andy, you don't have to apologize to your sister. You win 5-4.
They better be bringing that liquor delivery, buddy.
Yeah, vsliquor.com.
We only have a couple minutes left before literally the show shuts itself off. I'm curious, because we mentioned the Legends of Sport podcast at the beginning, and I wish we probably should have talked about it a little bit more. But how is being the kind of photographer that you are? You talked about being observant, all these other things. How has that helped you as an interviewer? And doing this show.
It's been so much.
I was going to ask that too.
So much fun. It started when I started doing this show on the Lakers Time Warner Network, which now is Spectrum, called Through the Lens, where I just sit and talk about Laker personality. And my producer, I was very nervous before the first show, and the producer said to me, Andy, just you know all these people, just make believe you're like at a bar or in your living room or whatever on the team bus. The first guest was James Worthy, and it was just a great conversation. So I've taken that into the podcasting world. And even with people that I don't know, I've had, we've done over 80 podcasts, and I think I've had maybe 15 people that I didn't know ahead of time. But we do a lot, me and my researcher, Veronica, we do a lot of research, and I always find something about that person which was a pivotal moment in their life to talk about, because we all have that, right? And that always just
still waiting for mine.
Yeah, but
that's why we haven't been invited on a show yet.
That opens the door to conversation, and so I love it. I really enjoy it. It's a challenge, It's a challenge because you have to stay interesting, and you have to, be building an audience and all that. But now that with the LA Times, it's a big boost for us.
It's the Legends of Sport podcast. You find it, and I love saying this, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple
Right.
Podcasts.
Now
and
with
all
the
that.
LA Times, and that's awesome.
It's
the LA
really,
Times.
really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Andy, thank you so much for coming on, staying up late on a Friday. We really appreciate it. VSLiquor.com. Monday, we'll be back with LeJethro Jenkins, right, Andy?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great podcaster. He works with Josiah Johnson. He's extremely funny, knows the NBA. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So we'll see
Well,
everybody. Have a great
thank you,
weekend.
guys.
And thank you, Andy. Really,
Thanks, Andy.
really
It's
appreciate it.
always fun, man. We appreciate it.